Have you ever tried to pump yourself up only to end up feeling less confident? Or maybe you felt a sudden jolt of fear about flying right after a crash was on the news. Well, today we're diving into the mental shortcut behind all that. It's a fascinating glitch in our thinking that constantly mistakes what's memorable for what's actually true. So, to kick things off, I've got a little test for you. It's a puzzle, really, about how our own minds work, and I promise you, the answer is not what you'd expect. All right, let's say you have a big presentation coming up, and you want to walk in feeling confident, feeling assertive. What do you think is the better way to prep your mind? Should you try to list a whole bunch of times you were assertive, or just focus on a few really clear, strong examples? Okay, let's put some numbers on it. This is based on a real psychology experiment. They took two groups of people. Group A had to list 6 times they acted assertively. Group B had a tougher job. They had to list 12. Now the big question is, which group do you think actually felt more assertive when they were done? Take a guess. We'll circle back to the answer in just a bit. To figure out that puzzle, we first need to understand a really powerful and kind of sneaky shortcut our brains are using all the time. It's called the Availability Heuristic, and it's a cornerstone of Daniel Kahneman's work on how we think. So here's the big idea. The Availability Heuristic is basically a mental rule of thumb. When our brain needs to figure out how common or probable something is, it doesn't go looking for statistics. It just asks one simple question. How easily can I think of an example? If memories pop up quickly and without effort, our brain just assumes it must be really common. You know, our brains can be incredibly lazy. So instead of tackling a difficult, data-driven question like, what is the statistical frequency of this event? It does a quick bait and switch. It substitutes that hard question for a much, much easier one. How does it feel trying to remember this? That feeling of ease or struggle literally becomes the answer. You can actually feel this happening in your own head right now. Just look at these 2 sets of letters. Which set do you think you can make more English words from? I bet you almost instantly had a gut feeling that it's the second one, right? You didn't actually try to make any words. You just felt the potential, the ease. That immediate feeling is the availability heuristic at work. Now, most of the time, this shortcut is super efficient. But, and this is a big but, it has a major blind spot. The problem is that how easily we remember something isn't always a good indicator of how often it actually happens. Let's look at how our minds get fooled. So, some memories are just stickier than others. Big, flashy events like a celebrity divorce are all over the news, which makes them feel way more common than they really are. Same goes for dramatic things like plane crashes or our own personal experiences. Anything that's vivid or comes with a picture has this outsized impact on our memory, making it highly available and tricking us into thinking it happens all the time. And this has very real consequences for how we behave. I mean, think about it. A plane crash dominates the news cycle for a week, and suddenly the idea of flying feels incredibly risky. But the actual statistical risk hasn't changed at all. It's just that the vivid, dramatic memory is so easy to access that it completely hijacks our perception of danger. Okay, so let's get back to our assertiveness puzzle from the beginning. Now that we understand this whole idea of availability, the totally counterintuitive result from that experiment is about to make a whole lot of sense. All right, here it is, the big reveal. The group that was asked to list only 6 examples, the easier task, ended up feeling way more assertive than the group that had to come up with 12. I know, it sounds completely backward, right? You'd think more evidence would make you more confident, but that is just not how our brains are wired. And the results from the study are just so clear. As you can see, the group with the easier task, recalling just 6 instances, rated themselves as significantly more assertive. The other group, the one that had to really struggle to find 12 examples, actually felt less assertive when they were done. So here's the critical insight. Your brain isn't counting the evidence. It's monitoring the feeling of the search itself. Researchers call this cognitive fluency. Coming up with 6 examples, that feels fluent, easy, smooth. But trying to come up with 12, for most people, that's a real struggle. And it's that feeling of struggle that your brain latches onto. Your brain basically makes an inference. It's thinking, wow, this is surprisingly hard. If I'm struggling this much to think of times I was assertive, I guess I must not be a very assertive person after all. The difficulty of the task itself becomes the evidence that sways your judgment. Okay, so once you learn how this trap works, you start to see it absolutely everywhere. So let's talk about how it shows up in daily life and, more importantly, what we can actually do to outsmart our own brains. You see this all the time in relationships and on teams at work. When you ask couples to estimate what percentage of the housework they do, the numbers almost always add up to way more than 100%. Why? Well, it's because every single time you took out the trash or did the dishes, it was a vivid personal memory. Your partner's contributions, they're just not as available in your mind. It's not about being selfish, it's a straight-up memory bias. And you should know, there are definitely times when we're most vulnerable to falling into this trap. When you're distracted or multitasking, when you're in a really good mood, if you're someone who puts a lot of faith in your intuition, or even when you're feeling powerful. In all those situations, you're much more likely to just trust that easy gut feeling instead of pausing to think it through. So how do we fight back? Honestly, the single most powerful tool is just awareness. The moment you know this bias exists, you can start to catch it in the act. When a really strong gut feeling pops into your head, just pause for a second and ask yourself, wait, is this thing I believe actually true? Or is it just popping into my head because it's easy to remember right now? That one question is often enough to engage your more analytical brain and help you sidestep the trap. So I'll leave you with this final thought. The next time a gut feeling washes over you, a fear, a judgment about someone, or a belief about yourself, take a beat. Ask yourself, is this feeling based on facts, or is it just based on a memory that happens to be vivid, dramatic, and really easy to recall? Questioning that feeling might just be the smartest move you make all day. Thanks for joining me.